We also knew that we had to make it truly a global association, not a U.S. association that also had a couple of chapters or, some firms or people outside of the U.S. And we needed to figure out the path to make that happen. Originally, it was on a list, but it wasn't part of our strategic plan that we had developed. And we were about a year into this 3 to 5 year strategic plan. We came back together and said, you know what? If we don't make this one of our core initiatives, it's not going to happen.
Welcome to Behind the Screens, Conversations with Background Screening Pros. I'm Les Rosen, your host, and I'm excited to have you here. On this podcast, we chat with the people who know the background screening world inside and out. Executives, industry experts, legal pros, and more. We dive into their personal stories and insights to give you a real look at what's happening behind the scenes. Whether you work in the screening industry or are just curious, Behind the Screens bring you the real, unfiltered conversations from the people who make it all happen. Stick around for stories you won't hear anywhere else. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Screens, a podcast featuring folks from the background screening industry, the folks that make it happen, who do all the important work that the screening industry does. Brought to you, of course, by Barry Nixon, the Pre-Employment Directory, the Background Buzz. And today we are delighted to have a special guest, the director of the PBSA, the Professional Background Screening Association, someone that I have known and admired for a long time, who has just done such an exceptional job guiding the association from where it was to something much, much bigger. And of course, I'm talking about none other than Melissa Sorenson. Melissa, welcome to the program.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for being here. And just delighted and looking forward to the conversation. So the first thing I like to ask people is, where are you today? Where in the world is Melissa Sorenson? Where are you talking to us from?
I'm in the U.S. I'm actually out of a home office in Minnesota, so northern U.S., a smallish town about 35 miles northwest of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. So this is where I spend most of my days. PBSA, all of our staff works remote, including me, so we all work out of home offices. And I happen to be in Minnesota, but my team is spread around the U.S., including a team member in Canada.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, I mean, if you ever wanted to go to a Twins game, I suppose you could.
I did. I went to one last weekend.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's great up there at Target Stadium. So for those of you that don't know, I think everyone does, but why don't you tell us about your current role, what you currently do, what you like about it, what you find most interesting about it?
Sure. I'm currently the Executive Director for the Professional Background Screening Association, PBSA. I'm coming up on 13 years in this role as Executive Director. Unlike most of my peers that run other trade associations, my background is not in trade associations. My background's in the background industry itself, and that's one of the things that I like the most about this role and my team is we've got a team that's about 50-50. Some of us come from industry themselves and some have trade association background, which I think helps us service our members better. As a trade association, we understand what they're going through, and we also have the expertise to run a trade association, which is a pretty nice mix. Things that I love about this role are all of the things I didn't know when I jumped in and raised my hand and asked the board to consider bringing me on, and it's all of the areas that are outside of my expertise that I get to keep learning in every day. Silly things like menu planning for 800 people and weighing in on that in the food and beverage budget, to a lot more direct one-on-one work with our legislators and regulators and our incredible GR communities, government relations around the world. I hit anything and everything on pretty much every given day. It's not something I was trained in, had any background in, or anticipated the full extent that I'd be touching when I took this on.
And it's fantastic because I know from the time you started to where we are now, the PBSA has just blossomed and grown exponentially. and it continues to grow with all the councils and so forth. So what was your career path to get from where you started after college and law school to where you are now?
Yeah, that's right. Started college and law school here in Minnesota. And when I started law school, my original thought plan was that I would be the more traditional lawyer way back to, I think I was about 8 years old when I considered that as my path and didn't really stray from that. Back then, I thought I would be looking more at something traditional family law practice, that sort of thing. As I got a little bit older and knew my own tendencies and passions, I knew that wasn't something I would be successful at while raising a family myself. And from there, I pretty quickly pivoted into the compliance world and legal. And outside of law school or just out of law school, like some of us did a long time ago, I read newspapers and want ads for open career positions and didn't know anything about background screening, had no intention of going into background screening, but found an in-house compliance role at a local background screening company, Verifications Inc., back in the day, located, headquartered in the Minneapolis area. And that's where I got my start. And I spent about 7.5 years there at Verifications Inc. before coming over to PBSA. And that path was what a lot of our leaders have seen, right? You come to a conference, you get pulled in by somebody to join in a meeting, just listen in and start taking part in a project. And then they find other areas to, the word we use is voluntold you, volunteer that you didn't know you were volunteering. Somebody voluntold you what project is yours next. And it just keeps going in a cycle. And you keep finding and meeting new people that you get to choose to work with. You don't have to do it. You're doing it because you want to. And that eventually landed me on the board of directors. And then for, I don't know, a hot minute or two, I think I was on the executive committee as a secretary before one of my board peers approached me at the same time. Verifications Inc. had been acquired by First Advantage and asked if I had any interest in pursuing leading the association. We were starting to mature at that point as an association. We'd been working with an AMC, an association management company, for all of our staffing, and they'd done a fantastic job, but we were at the point where we were ready to have some professional staff brought in. And I went from a peer on the board to preparing a presentation for my peers on the board and asking them to consider something they weren't considering, and that was bring on a dedicated executive director, somebody from industry, and me specifically, and to help run the association, partnering with our association management company for additional staff. And that's the, 60-second version of how I got from law school to PBSA today.
Well, I mean, I'll just give an editorial comment that the association is so lucky to have you, because it's just so ideal to have someone with your 10 years of just solid in the trench background screening work with with that legal education and that legal mind. It was such an ideal thing, and it was at a point where the association really needed professional leadership and couldn't depend upon just the volunteer effort of the chairs and the board. So anyway, what a great story. Thank you for sharing it. Along the career path, during your career at Verifications and with PBSA and PBSA Director, do you have any particular mentors or early influencers in your career you want to share with us?
Sure. I probably have too many that we can't cover. And because of my role at PBSA, I feel like I've had the unique privilege to work with a lot of strong leaders in this industry, and they've helped shape who I am and who I am in my professional life. But going back to if we just do maybe a condensed list, and I'll give them each a short attributes to all the ways they contributed to my life that mean a whole lot to me. Mary Poquette, one of our recent PBSA Mike Sankey Lifetime Achievement Award recipients. Mary Poquette took a gamble on somebody who applied for an open position on her team at Verifications Inc., who had no experience, fresh out of law school, and brought me on board. So I certainly can't ignore that. And she was not only instrumental in just bringing me into the industry, but 100% supportive of my work at then NAPBS and volunteering. So exposing me to other firms, not ever concerned that, somebody might poach me or something like that. Or maybe she knew nobody would want to poach me. I don't know. But she let me go to conferences and spend some of my time at verifications and volunteering for PBSA and fully supported that. So she's, probably first and last on that list of people who are influential and mentors to me. In the middle, I had some other great peers at Verifications Inc. that aren't in industry any longer, but really taught me work ethic, the screening industry, and then just as importantly, how to have fun while you're working, to make sure it's something, if you're going to do it all day, every day, and spend as much time working as we do, you should have fun while you're doing it. So I've had a couple of really great people from back in my day at Verifications Inc. that helped steer that path. My first conference, Nancy Roberts, I don't know how she found me or what her motive or intention was, but she figured out pretty quickly that I had a background in legal and said, you're coming with me to best practices and we're going to get you volunteering on this committee and leading. And it's those type of people that just take your arm and say, you look new. I don't think you know everybody here, so let me walk you around and let me get you engaged. And then, of course, Judy Gutkind. She was, again, one of our Lifetime Achievement Award recipients, and it's no coincidence. She and I served on the board together. She was on the leadership team on the executive committee when I was on the board, and she taught me and showed me what leaders look like on that board of directors, and she made the call to me and asked me if I would consider stepping onto the executive committee and extending my board term. I actually told her at the time I'd have to call her back. I wasn't sure about that. I don't like to do things halfway, and I knew that, sitting on the board was important and sitting on the executive committee was even more, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to let anybody down, starting with Judy, if I accepted. But she gave me time and a little pep talk, and I was thrilled that she and the rest of the board were willing to take another gamble on me and bring me onto the executive committee. So she's always been somebody, not just for me, I think countless PBSA people would say she's a cheerleader for anyone and everyone. She'll find your strengths and she'll showcase them on the mountaintop, and it's incredible to work with people like that. A couple others, there's Scott Maloney. You recently talked to him as well, our first provider member that also served as chair. And I think our first board member that went all the way through the executive committee and then signed up for another turn on the board. As one of our providers or associate members, he's always open to feedback from all of the members, and he's never self-motivated. And that can be tough when you're a provider serving with CRAs on the board. So watching him navigate that has also been something I try to watch and learn from and really appreciate. On another token, we've got one of our U.S. government relations leaders that's been around industry and PBSA for a long time. It's Chris Lemons. He's one of, if not the smartest people I've ever been around. And he never makes you feel like you're not as smart as him, but you're absolutely not as smart as he is. He's absolutely phenomenal, gives so much of his expertise and thinks things through thoughtfully from all of our members' perspectives, which is something that's hard to come by. Somebody who's got vested interest, and he does that time and again and is always willing to give his time, think things through with you, help work through, government relations, legislative, litigation, different considerations for us as an industry of where we should put our time, energy, and resources. And he does it selflessly, and he's got a great sense of humor on top of it. Just an absolute joy to work with. And then you look at the team that he's built, and it all resonates pretty well and certainly makes sense. So Chris is absolutely on that list. And then I'll just name one more, and I know that there's 30, 40, 50 probably that more than I'm missing, but Julie Hackman, another former PBSA chair, one that in my role, I get to work for a new boss every year. Whoever the chair of PBSA is my boss. And I like to make sure that I learn something from each one of them. Everybody brings a unique management style, priorities, and my goal is to take the best from all of them and start wrapping them into how I run the association. And Julie's just one who, as a boss for the year that I had her, was the most supportive, engaged without micromanaging, had nothing but positive things to say about her team, about her board. She was just really somebody that I learned a lot in terms of how I want to conduct myself as a leader of an organization, whether it's PBSA or any other organization. Her support as my boss was second to none.
That's fantastic. What a fantastic group of people. Mary Paquette was the first one you mentioned, will be a guest shortly, and a number of the other folks you mentioned either have been or will be guests. So thank you for sharing. It's really a great perspective. You've done so much, and in the position of executive director, you have so many stakeholders and so many people that have different approaches and different things, and it's a sensitive job. But
Yeah.
during your time, both at Verification Inc. and your time on the board and as executive director, is there a lesson that you learned early in your career that really come to top of mind that you would want to share with us?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. It actually goes back to my first mentor, Mary Paquette. When I started working, probably my first year or so, there was a lot of turnover and things happening in the industry. We were going through an economic downturn. There was rifts happening across industry, all of those things. And I was relatively new, and I thought my head might be on that chopping block, just as somebody new to the team. And Mary told me one of the things that she learned to do throughout her career was put your head down and work. There are times where, while there's a lot of noise and it impacts all of us, it's time to just put your head down and work and stay out of the noise. And that's one thing that I've taken with me, and not just in my professional life, but also, in personal relationships. Sometimes just stay out of the noise, be a sounding block if it's appropriate, but just put your head down, keep your focus where it's supposed to be for your job, whatever that might be, and you'll come out okay.
That's great advice. Ignore the noise, ignore the daily ups and downs and the this and the that, and put your head down and just do it. Right?
Yeah.
Now, you stayed in the screening industry. Obviously, have the skill and talent and experience to have gone to lots of other things, do whatever you want. What interests you most about the screening industry? What makes you passionate about working in this particular industry?
Well, I think I'm going to be repetitive of some of your past guests on this one. It's got to be the people, right? You're the number one thing behind this industry, despite everything else that goes on with the technology, all those things. It has to be the people. And whether you're somebody who's, landed at one screening company or one software company or one court retrieval company, and you've managed to find success and find your home and stay there, or you're somebody who's worked within the industry at 5 or 6 different companies, there's a reason that people in this industry, unlike any other that I've ever seen, stay in the industry. And I hate to say this in the role that I have, but it's not because background screening is the most interesting industry in the world. That's not it, right? We stay because of the people, and I'm uniquely blessed to be able to work with all of the people.
In your role as executive director, you get to work with not only the folks in the U.S., but worldwide too. How's that been for you?
I think that's kind of like our current, it's not that we haven't always had members from outside of the U.S., but you're seeing with some of the podcasts that you're doing, there are so many amazing people outside of the U.S. in this industry that we're just starting to see regularly engaged with some of the people that have been around in the U.S. for decades, right? And seeing some of that untapped talent that is out there. And I'm also watching that transition from that side of, outside of the U.S., where people are a little bit more skeptical of whether you can be competitors and really work together in an industry association, and seeing those sorts of transitions happening. Like we saw, back in the NAPBS days of figuring out that competitors actually work better together when they come together for a number of things. That outside of the U.S. work is now starting to come to the same process, and there's so many great people outside of the U.S. and I don't have to limit my work to only U.S. I get to go to our Europe conferences and our APAC conferences and work with those councils and their work product and start to see them really grow in the same ways that we did as an association just when we were, primarily U.S. It's pretty impressive.
And of course, for you as executive director, you work basically on a world clock, on a 24-hour clock. Because, all right, your afternoon is the middle of the night in many APAC countries and vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, best decision we made was going from NAPBS to PBSA, not just because of the name, but because it gave us an opportunity to expand our board and make sure we had a global footprint on our leadership. But from a logistics standpoint, scheduling calls is not as easy as it once was, but that it's worth it in the end.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, Melissa, looking back on your career in the background screening industry and your tremendous accomplishments at the PBSA, is there a particular accomplishment or a proud moment that stands out and brings a smile to your face you want to share with us?
The day that I made a pitch to the board of directors for them to take a gamble on me, it was not only the pitch that I made to them, it was the pitch before that I made to myself to take that gamble, because I was going from an employee, a great firm, Verifications Inc. and First Advantage. We're both tremendous firms with some career stability, I think, for the path that I was on. So talking to myself through what that might look like to take on a role that was not strictly legal and compliance, which is what I had planned for my future when I, signed up for the bills that came along with law school. And then going through kind of what that might look like in a totally different, same industry, but different type of career, running a trade association than working in a legal department at a screening company. And also just kind of the gamble with the PBSA didn't have budget for a dedicated executive director. This was an independent contractor position with a 1-year contract. So leaving one role to come on to a 1-year contract for them to figure out if it was going to work was a bit of a risk for me at that moment. I'm not a big risk taker, so that one was probably the biggest leap that I took in this role and the best one.
And obviously, it worked out really well. So let's spend a moment and talk a little bit more focused on PBSA and your role as executive director. One of the things that really impressed me the most is when during your leadership term, we went from NAPBS, which was a U.S.-centric, to PBSA, which is a worldwide organization, and went to the council structure. Tell us a little bit more about that growth pattern, how that all came about and worked out.
That was a couple of years. I mean, I say a couple of years, but that was our whole trajectory in the making, right? The intent was never for the association to be strictly U.S. And as we continued to grow and see more members outside of the U.S., it started to become apparent, even through our name, the National Association, that doesn't feel very global, that we needed to make changes. And we were at that phase in our growth journey. We were starting to mature as an association and have these strategic plans where we would really identify what our focus areas for the next 3 to 5 years would be. And they were not far off from what we see today. A lot of focus on government relations and growth and those types of things that are incredibly important to us. But we also knew that we had to make it truly a global association, not a U.S. association that also had a couple of chapters or, some firms or people outside of the U.S. And we needed to figure out the path to make that happen. Originally, it was on a list, but it wasn't part of our strategic plan that we had developed. And we were about a year into this 3 to 5 year strategic plan. We came back together and said, you know what? If we don't make this one of our core initiatives, it's not going to happen. So we need to say one of the things that is going to get done on this strategic plan is to convert NAPBS into a global trade association. And that means a new name, updating our bylaws. All of our strategic plan has to be considered globally. We need to reconstruct our board, reconstruct our chapter council. We need to reconsider how we do finances. We can't, just take in income from 20 members in our APAC region and consider that their budget for the year. We need to actually put what we've built here, and at that time, a primarily US organization, and put that time, energy, and resources to help us do the same thing outside of the US and transition over to PBSA. And it didn't happen overnight, but with that effort and that acknowledgement that this was going to be one of our strategic priorities, and the board gave me the flexibility to put together a small team, 4 to 5 people, to say, what does this look like? Make sure we've got representation from Canada, APAC, and Europe on this small team, along with a couple of our US members that have some vested global interest and experience. We've had about 6 people that came together and really fleshed this out of what it would look like, all of the moving pieces to make all of that happen. And everybody contributed, and nobody signed up for that, whether they were a board member or part of my task force that helped do that, without knowing that this was going to be the biggest thing that we did for this association in a very long time, and they had to be all in. And fortunately, they all were, and I'm really happy with that transition that the association made.
I mean, it sure seems to me that it's been a rousing success. I know we've had our first Canadian director with Chair Michelle LeBlanc, and I think next year we have Susie Thompson from the
Yes.
UK as the chair. So the various meetings, Canada, APAC, and Europe, Africa, apparently they have great speakers and they attract a lot of people. So from my perspective, from what I can see, it's been a rousing success.
Michelle was on that task force when she was on the board, and when, saw through the chair, and then now has come full circle and joined me back on the staff side.
And now she's your chief operating officer.
That's right.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so, the next PBSA national conference, Anaheim, and this hopefully air just before that. And I know you're looking forward to it. What's your thoughts about that?
Well, it's going to be in your backyard, so I expect we'll see you there.
All right. It's in my backyard, so it's hard for me to say no.
Yeah. With all your world travels, and, it's hard to source locations that I can convince you to travel to. So that's why I know that I'll have you there, so that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
This is also, for our newer members, this is a repeat location for us. We've been to Anaheim before. It was our first conference out of COVID. So being the first conference out of COVID, that was when, there was green wristbands. I'm comfortable, having conversations, red wristband, make sure you stay 6 feet away from me. There was masks everywhere. There was hand sanitizer. And the reason we're going back is, one, it's the perfect size hotel for us to actually have all of our attendees and the exhibit floor and the sessions all wrapped into a hotel. We're at a little bit of a spot with our size where we don't fit into a lot of hotels, but adding a convention center is not ideal. So if we can find those great hotel setups where we can fit our people and all of our stuff into the same hotel, that's a sweet spot for us at a reasonable price point. So Anaheim checked those boxes, but also for those that aren't aware of that, being our first conference out of COVID, we didn't have as many attendees as what we were used to. And when we contract with hotels for conferences, we're contracting 4 or 5 years out. So right now we're looking at 29, 30, and 31 agreements for those. And we look at our growth patterns and growth history. So you can imagine that back when we contracted for Anaheim the last time, our growth pattern was quite a bit higher than what we expected on our first, or what we actually achieved on that conference. So our choice was to cut the hotel out a pretty large sum of money because we didn't have as many people as what we contracted for. We were in attrition, or they offered to let us come back in 4 years. And we easily said yes to come back. We liked the hotel. It worked really good. We had good feedback from our attendees. It's a great flow for a conference, and it's a great location. So,
I mean, I'm just amazed at the logistics. So this is 2025. You're already looking at 2030, 31, 32. That far in advance.
it is that far in advance. We're not quite to 32 yet, but we're contracted through 2028, and they usually happen. It's not uncommon for them to be booked together. So sometimes you'll get a better rate if you can do 2 hotels in a family back to back, that sort of a thing. So we're looking right now at 2029, 2030, and 2031 for us to be able to get the best rates. So that's another, when we went from a smaller association to professionally growing and developing an association, and of taking some of those, what we originally had as committees. We had a conference committee back in the day that helped us with, finding locations in that. And when you start to look at the sourcing process that we have now to get the space we need at the price points, it's also typically 12 to 18 months from RFP to signing those agreements that check all of the boxes we need. So it's one of those things that you start to take on as professional staff, and it has us looking far out. You still get nervous because you don't know when the next global pandemic's going to be, or, avoiding the hurricane zone during hurricane season, which is fall. So avoiding that area is a little bit of a stress point, all the things that you consider.
And a lot of people, I don't think, realize everything that goes on under the hood. So just that one little iota we talked about, just all the planning that goes in just to where and what hotel and what city the meetings will be, taking into account hurricane season and everything you mentioned. And you multiply that by 100 little things, and there's just so many moving parts. I think people, it boggles the mind. I don't think people appreciate how many things that you have to deal with as executive director in an organization.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
One of the, top of the list of things that I didn't know that I was signing up for in this path, perhaps, but you learn a lot, and, it's a fun puzzle and piece to fit together.
That's absolutely. Well, let's move away from PBSA and let's talk about Melissa Sorenson outside of PBSA. And I'm going to put you in the spot and say, okay, even though the executive director role could take 24 hours a day since it's a global organization, when you're not doing PBSA, what kind of things do you do for fun, and what kind of activities and hobbies and things like that you'd like to share with us?
I don't know that I have a lot of hobbies or those kinds of things, or maybe I don't do enough things for fun. But, once you work a full-time position, I've got 2 kids. There's a lot of ways to get involved. I think, most newcomers, if your organization has a membership, you, by virtue of the organization, have access to anything and everything. You don't have to go to a conference. Of course, if you can, or if you can make the case, that should be a priority, is getting to a conference. But if you can't go to a conference, go onto the website and listen to some of the webinars, join the live webinars, listen to the Global Learning Center 20-minute on-demand content that we've got from around the globe. See what committees are out there. See what their time schedules are for their meetings. Sign on to one of them. You don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to raise your hand and participate. Try a couple of them and figure out which people seem like the kind of people you want to keep talking to outside of your organization. And as you find your spot in your comfort zone, then start raising your hand. Then start being more active. And once I've seen a lot of people follow that path. And often once you raise your hand for a project and you start meeting more people, it's a resource for your organization as well, because now you've got somebody you can reach out to when something pops up for your organization that you haven't seen before. The number of times after, I signed up for a committee or even attended a conference, the people that I had met from competitive organizations, if I had a question that I could call, I might not post a question, on a forum or something like that, but I could call somebody and ask them. They always made the time to talk to me. I never had anyone say no. And being able to make those connections through calling onto a committee or just reaching out to PBSA staff as a resource to say, do you think there's anybody who would talk to me about this? We're happy to make those connections. We can't offer, recommendations for partners or those types of things that would go into antitrust territory for us, but we can absolutely make connections for you with other people for you to engage with, some pretty awesome, warm, welcoming people. You can sign up to have a mentor. So if you want to get to know people, let us know. We'll connect you with some longtime industry and PBSA people, and they can help show you the ropes as well. There's so many people welcome and ready to bring on more team members and bring on more colleagues in other parts of the world or other parts of the country that you happen to be in. It's as easy as raising your hand or asking staff. We've got a volunteer webpage on the website now that has all of the volunteer opportunities that we're actively looking for volunteers for. Maybe there's not one today that fits your skill set, but there probably will be one tomorrow or next month. Finding ways to engage like that is, to me, an easy first step. You don't have to lead. You don't have to write the whole paper. You join with a group of colleagues and come together and flesh something out. Often it's a task force. It's a limited project. It's very easy to do. And then you find what works for you and what's beneficial, not just for you personally, but for your career path and for your organization. And that work often leads to supervisors saying, you should go to the next conference. You should meet some more people. Find ways to keep growing for us and for you. I think there's so many ways to engage within the association, and it doesn't have to be a single path. We can meet you where you're at to help you find your place.
Well, I mean, that's absolutely a fantastic summary of what people can do if they want to advance in the industry and not just, 9 to 5, and which is fine if that's what you want.
Yeah.
But if you actually want to advance and meet people and have other opportunities, it's such a great menu of possibilities that's within anyone's grasp. Well, like I said, time goes quick and having fun. Don't want to take your entire day or evening, but before we sign off, Melissa, let me give you the last word. Anything you want to add or say? The floor is yours.
I just want to first say thank you for inviting me and having me here with you. And also beyond that, thank you for paving the way in this industry. You were one of the first people to lead this organization and to support this organization coming together. And if it wasn't for your efforts there, I wouldn't be here today, along with all of the people that surround me and lift all of us up. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate those kind words. And on behalf of everyone, let me thank you for all the great work that you and your team, your staff and the professional IMI staff has done to advance the profession. It's just so much to do and so much has been done. And I'm excited to look at what's coming in the future. I think it's only going to get better. So, ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of Behind the Screens. Our guest today, our special guest, who I was delighted to have, is Melissa Sorenson, the Executive Director of PBSA, with just marvelous information. And this is one of those must-see, must-hear podcasts I hope everyone will have a chance to listen to. Be sure to hit like on the episode on LinkedIn or subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we'll be back in the following weeks with additional pros from behind the screens. And once again, thanks, Melissa Sorenson, for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Les.
All right, that was yet another wonderful conversation with a background screening pro. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an update. And hey, if you got a moment, we'd love for you to leave us a review. It really helps get the word out. For more info or to catch up on past episodes, or to make suggestions or to suggest possible future guests, head over to our website. Once again, this is your host, Les Rosen, and it's been a pleasure to bring you another episode. See you on the next episode. Thanks.